All right, this next question, Brian, this is from Andre. Andre said, where in the foo does rental property investment land? If I want to buy a rental property, not necessarily a REIT, but become a landlord, like I have a desire to do that, where do I start saving for the down payment? And how do I know that I'm ready for that? And Brian, I think this question's so good because I feel like if you go watch TikTok or Instagram or fill in the blank, this is the only way you become wealthy. You got to go become a real estate landlord, and you got to figure out how to figure out the real estate game. What do you think? Where does it fit in the foo?
Yeah, I love this question because, by the way, we get a bad rap. We love real estate. We even do real estate. I mean, I'm talking about we are 8-figure real estate type people. That way, for all the folks out there who say these guys don't know anything about real estate. But here's the thing I would share is that, and this, I want to get some clarifications. A lot of you who there is an easy way into real estate if you have the opportunity and that your kids can go to the school in the areas. House hacking's a legit thing. Mm-hmm. We've seen so many people, because basically a house hack means that you are renting out part of your primary residence. So if you bought a duplex, a triplex, a quadplex, but you are living in that building, you actually just bought a primary residence that you get to rent out. If you can financially do that, that's not what I think Andre's asking about. Andre's asking about somebody who's not house hacking with their primary residence. He's actually thinking about buying rental real estate.
Wealth building tool.
So where does that fit in? Because all over social media, they make it seem like it's so easy. Mm-hmm. And the thing I have found is that I don't see much true passive rental real estate, because we have tenants who, I've heard me tell my stories about the tenants changing engines in the living room, people who, when they get ticked off, they leave, they rip out the cabinets, and yes, you have a security deposit, but you'll quickly figure out, you hope they just destroy the sheetrock, because you can replace sheetrock and carpet pretty easily. When they start ripping out fixtures and cabinets, it gets very expensive. But I still think that, especially if you know where the real estate market is from a valuation standpoint. But I will tell you to be a little nervous, because we've seen, like I was looking down in Florida for myself, and most of the property in Florida had appreciated by over 50% just in the last 3 years. So I start thinking about the cyclical nature of real estate. Do I think I'm going to make a lot more money on this Florida property now, or are we going to probably be sitting flat to let the historical returns kind of catch up, reversion to the mean? If you're catching that, the purchase price means a lot. So that's something to consider. But from a cash flow, and that's really where the question is. Yep. I'm giving you way too much nuance, but I want you to be educated. It is a step 8 of the financial order of operations. If you go to moneyguy.com/resources, you can download your own version. The reason I say it's a step 8, prepaid future expenses, or as I affectionately like to call abundance goals, this is when you have enough financial foundation underneath you. You've got your employer match. You've paid off all the high interest debt. You've actually got cash reserves. You've taken advantage of the Roth opportunities to get some tax-free growth, your employer's retirement matching and maxing out the retirement. But this is where you get to step 8, where you say, okay, I got enough jingle in my pocket to make it through whatever ups and downs. Because when we bought our first big commercial real estate property, there's our landlord at the time who owned a lot of downtown Franklin. He said, boys, I'm proud of you. Just make sure you got enough money to make it through the next rough patch. Yep. Because it happens. Yep. I mean, it is going to happen. And that's why, just promise me, if you're going to go into this fun world of real estate where you get to take advantage of leveraged real estate and the return of what leverage creates for you, you got to have the pockets to make it through the long, slow winters where people don't pay rent, and yet the banks still want their money.
Yeah, Brian, you do a great job. You always tell people if you're going to start a business or you're going to start something like real estate, you ought to put on your 3D glasses. You have these 3 plans: this dream plan, this down-to-earth plan, and then what you like to call the doo-doo plan, right? I think a lot of people don't really think about that worst-case scenario plan, but I would tell you, Andre, when it comes to real estate, I would ask you this question: what will it cost you if it goes completely wrong? You buy a limb. If you ever, what was the Tom Hanks movie? The Money Pit? Go watch The Money Pit. Let's assume that is your rental property. And let's go assume that you buy The Money Pit at the end of 2007. So let's combine a bunch of factors that makes it really, really bad. Will it break you? And if you're in a situation where making that decision will likely break you and stop your financial journey, I would argue that perhaps you are potentially too early to the game. Or maybe you're a young person that says, hey, I'm already broke as a joke. I don't have anything going anyway, so it can't break me. I would argue that the amount of time and energy and calories and dollars that endeavor would take away from you, and if it might take 3, 4, 5, 7, 10 years to manifest, think about how much opportunity cost was lost by you not having your dollars working for you, building a solid foundation on I'm going to say lower risk, on a lower headache, lower brain damage way, just by buying low-cost index funds, following the financial order of operations. So if this decision could break you, could literally stop you in your tracks and halt your financial journey, I would argue that perhaps you're not at the place where getting into real estate might make sense. Now, if you say, okay, if I did this, it might slow me down, it might move me in a direction I didn't necessarily want to be moving, but I can still recover from this and I'm still going to be able to build towards all of my other goals, then I think that's probably a good indicator that maybe you are ready for it, assuming that you're in step 8 and you've done the things you're supposed to be doing.
Andre, as you get into this, one last word. Make sure you do your due diligence, background checks on tenants, because we saw in the last in the pandemic, the government did something I've never seen before, is that they basically allowed you not to be able to very noble, not to anybody to leave the residence. But I got to tell you, for all you investors out there, be careful.
It's scary.
Because that's something that we're not the first ones to come up with that idea. If you go to Paris and other places in Europe, but that's why you see a lot of places that will sit vacant for years, is because the vetting, the due diligence to let people rent from you has gotten to be so hard. So just think about that. That's part of the due plan, is that what happens when I have the bank notes due, the mortgage payments have to be made, and nobody can, and I can't push out the person that won't pay rent. That's a legit thing, and that's not getting into the moral part of being a landlord and so forth. I'm just telling you, this is part of the numbers, the nuts and bolts of making sure you can afford in any scenario.